Before railroads, architectural products traveled from farm to ports by steamship. Richard King came to Texas as a steamboat captain. However, rivers were only passable for short distance and roads could only be used during dry weather. This is why railroads improved the lives of farms in Texas. Railroads also changed the lives of many other Texans. Trains reached Texas. Texas had only 400 miles of railroad track in 1860. Then a railroad boom hit Texas. A boom is a time of rapid growth. By 1890, Texas had more than 8,000 miles of track. The boom began at the port cities along the Gulf Coast. Then it spread northward. These developments in transportation influenced economic activities in Texas. The impact of the railroad boom in Texas was huge. Cities and towns sprang up along the new railroad lines. Businesses could now ship and receive goods quickly. Texans could visit other parts of their state and the nation more easily. Some railroads were linked to other lines in the United States and to lines in Mexico. This let Texans trade with other states and with Mexico. Railroads did not help everyone. American Indian life was negatively affected by these changes in Texas. Tracks were laid across American Indian lands. The environment also suffered. Railroad companies slaughtered buffalo on and off American Indian lands. This loss of buffalo affected American Indians, who relied on buffalo for food and clothing. Newcomers arrived by train. The railroads brought new settlers to Texas. People from other states moved to Texas by train. Others came from foreign countries by ship, then used trains to travel to their new homes in Texas. One group of newcomers were the Chinese. Thousands of Chinese workers came to Texas to build the railroads. These workers laid track under difficult conditions. Most earned $20 a month plus food and shelter. Some saved their money and returned to China. Others stayed after the railroads were built and found new jobs. Boom times. During the railroad boom, from about 1870 to 1900, the population of Texas more than doubled. It grew from 800,000 to more than 2 million people. These newcomers brought their ideas, culture, religions, and music and art with them. The locomotive, or train steam engine, was also an engine of change. The impact of the railroads on life in Texas and the changes to major industry ran deep. Railroad companies put up advertisements that promoted Texas in other states. Special home seeker trains let people explore Texas. New settlers could ride these trains for low rates. Railroad companies also impacted the farming industry. The railroads earned money by shipping out farm crops and bringing in farm supplies throughout Texas and to other parts of the country. So they encouraged farmers to try new and better ways to raise crops. If farmers were successful, the railroads would be too. Locomotives were powered by steam. The railroads needed water to make steam, so they built wells throughout Texas. As the railroad lines stretched farther into the frontier, they continued to dig wells. The railroads then sold land around the wells to settlers. New towns were distributed along Texas railroad lines and near wells. Growing industries in Texas. The railroad boom led to a boom in many Texas businesses. By the 1870s, for example, railroads had reached the pine forest of East Texas. Lumber companies now had a fast way to ship the trees they cut. The lumber was loaded onto railroad cars. The trains quickly carried it to distant buyers. As a result, the lumber industry grew rapidly. Shipping was a major industry along the Gulf Coast. Galveston was a busy port city. Ships from all over the world unloaded goods there. Railroads moved these goods to other parts of Texas and the United States. Railroads also brought goods to the port to be shipped by sea. In 1860, a railroad was built to link Galveston to Houston. This link was important because it enabled Houston to grow. Railroads changed ranching. Texas' first industry, ranching, was changing too. By 1890, the days of trail drive were over. The railroads had reached cattle country. Cowhands only had to herd the cattle to nearby shipping points. There, the cattle were loaded onto cattle cars. The towns around the shipping points grew. Then, as today, the industries of Texas were changing. Growing cities. Railroads had a big impact on the growth of Texas cities. Clusters of settlements grew around the railroad junctions. A junction is where two or more rail lines meet. This pattern of settlement continued into the early 1900s, as most major Texas cities were railroad junctions. These meeting points attract businesses and industry. They also attracted workers looking for jobs. Fort Worth, for example, was a junction. It had more than 20,000 people in 1900. Fort Worth became home to stockyards and meat packing plants. The railroads that met there brought in cattle and shipped out beef products. People called the city Cowtown, a nickname it still has today. The city of Marshall was another junction. There, the railroads built large repair shops. Skilled workers serviced and repaired locomotives. In the Panhandle, the railroad companies repaired equipment at Childress. Walter Chrysler worked as a manager there. Later, he moved to Michigan and formed his own automobile company, the Chrysler Corporation. In East Texas, the city of Tyler was in a rich cotton growing region. After the Civil War, its cotton industry was in ruins. Early railroads bypassed the city, making matters worse. Then, in 1874, town citizens pursued a railroad to build a line to Tyler. The railroad created jobs. It also helped farmers ship their cotton. In 10 years, the population of Tyler had tripled. How important were railroads to the growth and life of Texas cities and towns? Take the example of Clarendon. In 1897, the people of that town moved their houses 5 miles. That way, they would be close to the depot or train station of a busy rail line. After 1900, Texas began to build electric railways within cities. The largest was in the Dallas area. There, the Texas Electric Railway had 226 miles of track. Electric railways were a fancy way to travel in and around cities. A Texas record. By 1910, Texas had set a record. It had more miles of railroad track than any other state. The state also had more railroad employees than any other state. Texas still holds these records today. The growth of free enterprise. Businesses in Texas grew rapidly as the need for goods and services grew. These businesses developed under the free enterprise system. Free enterprise is an economic system in which people are free to buy and sell goods and services with little control by the government. The benefit of free enterprise is that it helps both producers and consumers. A producer is a person or company that makes or sells goods or offers a service. A consumer is a person or company that buys or uses goods and services. For example, under free enterprise, farmers have the freedom to grow cotton, corn, or some other crop. Whatever the farmer chooses, he or she has the right to grow as much or as little of the crop as possible. The farmer is free to sell or not sell the crop to a buyer. Why would a farmer not want to sell a crop? Under free enterprise, producers hope to make a profit. A profit is money left over after paying the cost of producing something. A cotton farmer, for example, has many costs: seeds, machinery, land, and so on. To be profitable, farmers try to find the best time to sell, the time when they can get the most money for their crop. A cotton buyer has a right to buy any cotton that is for sale. Some cotton might not look or feel right. The consumer is free to keep shopping till he or she finds the right cotton at the right price. Supply and demand. Free enterprise is based on supply and demand. Supply is the number of items that producers offer for sale at a certain price. Demand is a number of items that consumers or buyers are willing to buy at a certain price. Think again about the Texas cotton farmer. Suppose that it was a bad year for growing cotton. Disease killed some of the crop. The supply of cotton would be low. In this case, the price of cotton would rise. Buyers would have to pay more to get some of the limited supplies. Another year, the cotton crop might be very good. There would be plenty of cotton available for sale. If demand stays the same as the year before, there would be more supply than demand. Then the price of cotton would fall. Cotton producers would lower their prices to attract buyers. An efficient system. Free enterprise is efficient. Supply and demand lets prices rise and fall to the right level. Free enterprise also leads to new technology. That's because producers want to produce goods more efficiently, and consumers benefit from the increased supply.